Welcome to the latest webinar in the Elemental programme for 2022. This is part 2 in the Integrated EV Solutions Digital Festival, which kicked off yesterday. Our topic for the hour today is innovative EV charging options, in our session sponsored by Schneider Electric. Your chair for the next 60 minutes, my name is Jim McClelland, founder and editor of SustMeme, home to both the magazine and the top 500 rankings. Joining me on the panel this sunny afternoon are Lowry Williams, Transport Systems Engineer, Energy Systems Catapult, Paul Gambrell, Team Leader, ZEV and Energy Integration, iHub Innovation Team, Oxfordshire County Council. You must have large business cards there, Paul. Lorna McAteer, Fleet Manager, National Grid, and Amit Chopra, Head of Commercial E-Mobility, UK and Ireland, Schneider Electric. It's all live, as you will see. There's a Q&A to finish, so pop your questions in the appropriately named Ask a Questions box, probably in the middle at the bottom of your screen. Type them in there, you pose them, I'll ask them, they'll answer them. So a bit about Elemental. The webinar forms part of a programme of panel debates hosted and produced by Elemental, elementaldigital.co.uk. It's the online community for professionals focused on innovation in heat, water, air and energy, vital elements within the built environment now and in the future. Please note, Elemental's a CPD member, so good news means all the webinars are CPD accredited. Full diary of events on the website, range of upcoming webinars. In particular, the final session in our EV Solutions Festival is tomorrow. It's the future of EV charging. It's a case study with Portsmouth City Council. So that's Thursday at 1 p.m. Kicks off an hour earlier than today, so set your alarms. You can also view the back catalogue, whole host of topics, including yesterday's opener on installing EV charging points at your building, all available on demand. Great who's who of speakers and all free to access. So, got a lot to cover today and a good sized audience, so I'm going to be very brief with the intro, but a quick recap of some points from yesterday and general background. So, electric vehicles. Figures from the Society of Motor Manufacturers and Traders, SMMT, show now over 530,000 battery electric cars on UK roads, plus a further 405,000 plug-in hybrids. Uptake boosted, as we all know, partly by the announcement that came out in November 2020 from the UK government that there's going to be a ban on all sales of new petrol and diesel cars by 2030. However, not only to service existing users, support the growth, scale and speed of decarbonisation, it's going to depend not just on the vehicles, but the charging infrastructure and the charging options, which is what we're discussing. There are already over 35,000 charging devices, at least installed at some, I think, 22,000 plus locations nationwide, according to ZapMap yesterday. Department for Transport forecast end of the decade, they're talking numbers more like 300,000 chargers, they said yesterday as well. So this second webinar, we're going to look at EV solutions. We're going to look at innovative approaches, how they can help us get there, new developments, research, different options for public charging, buildings with no off-street parking, mobile charging, shared fleet, all the different and inventive ways that we can reach some of those targets and improve access and availability. So enough from me, let the debate begin. So firstly, I'd like to explore how far and how fast innovation is advancing. I'm going to just ask our panel to introduce themselves, explain their perspective, share some opening insights. It's going to be a kind of who are you, where do you fit into the puzzle, what are the hot spots for innovation at present. So to kick us off from the body with a stated mission to unleash innovation, no less, what's the view from the leading edge? Where's the buzz, please, Lowry?
Hi everyone, so I'm Lowry, I'm a Transport Systems Engineer at the Energy Systems Catapult, and the Energy Systems Catapult really is focused around helping UK businesses, innovators and government bodies and local authorities and across the energy community exploit opportunities as we transition to a net zero world. My work largely focuses around the decarbonisation of road transport and what that means for the energy system. We bring that lens to all of the work that we're doing. And in practice, what that means is I focus a lot on the the charging infrastructure required, as well as the supporting electricity system infrastructure required to support the net zero ambitions for the transition. And although we do a lot of work with SMEs and specific innovators, the large majority of the work that I do is actually technology agnostic. To a certain degree, we look at charging around less about this specific type of charge point and more about how people use charge points and the different types of use cases. Most recently, we worked with the Electric Vehicle Energy Task Force. If I slip into acronyms, that's EVET. The Department for Transport, OZEV and BEIS to support policy and funding decisions around the provision of charging for current and future EV owners without access to off-street parking. It's fairly easy to have to charge your car if you've got an off-road parking space. It's a lot more challenging if you don't, or if you rent and aren't able to install your own charging infrastructure. And there are two main focuses around being able to support that. And the first is around the provision of charging solutions on street and at local rapid hubs. Not only will the installation of these benefit EV users without access to off-street parking, but by the sheer fact of their visibility and being public-facing charge points, you also encourage and help support other consumers to understand how an EV might be a viable option for them as their own personal vehicle. And the sort of second area of innovation that we sort of like to focus on when we're talking about charging infrastructure, which might be fairly unsurprising from an energy point of view, is around the importance of demand management through various methods of smart charging. Through some of the modelling and scenario analysis we undertook for the Electric Vehicle Energy Task Force earlier this year, there's the potential for EV charging to account for around 14% of the UK's electricity demand by 2035. And that's a demand that will, by dint of wide-scale electrification, be larger than it is today. So understanding how users behave and unleashing technological solutions that can mitigate the impacts of these increases in peak demands, as well as providing cost-saving benefits for EV users, will be vital to protect and maintain our energy systems. That's where we focus.
Excellent. Thank you. Really good intro. And as you say, we discussed a lot yesterday about the fact that we can't look at this in isolation. It's part of an energy system. It's part of a strategic and political journey towards net zero. It's also, as you hinted at the end, and Shamla from Coventry City Council said yesterday, it's not just about tech and energy, it's about behaviour change as well. It's about people issues and community issues. But you rightly flagged up on-street scenarios, a lot of talk about hubs, also destination charging has been mentioned, pit stop charging, so all these possible scenarios. So Paul, if I come to you now, so from a local authority perspective, what are the innovation issues of real interest to you and your team at present?
Oh, good afternoon, everyone. So I'm Paul Gambrell, Zero Emission Vehicle and Energy Integration Team Leader at Oxfordshire County Council, as Jim said, probably one of the longest job titles in the known universe. So what's the challenge facing us? Well, it's much of what Lowry has just mentioned. I mean, a big one for us, obviously, is what technologies can be employed to solve those problems for people who don't have off-road parking? How do we get more chargers in place across Oxfordshire as a whole? And are they the right chargers? Are they accessible? Are they usable? The human factor part of this, as we've already touched upon, should not be underestimated at all. And it's very important to us to make sure that what is employed across Oxfordshire for our residents, businesses and visitors does the job properly and does the job reliably. So yeah, awful lot of work going on, looking at various technological solutions for the problem for people without drives, and we'll no doubt go into a bit more detail about that as we go through this afternoon. But increasingly also looking at things like, how are we going to move freight, and how is freight going to be moved through Oxfordshire and through our market towns and cities? That's a big challenge going forward. How do we do that at zero emission? And last but not least, how do we do all this whilst minimizing the impact on our local energy grid? Whilst, that is the responsibility of the DNOs to upkeep, we have a major part to play in that as well. And, how we balance that, how we are clever with demand management, how we're clever with storage and things like that is an increasingly important part of the jigsaw puzzle in the electrification journey.
Excellent. And if I could just ask one tiny follow on, obviously I said yesterday, towns or cities or counties are the same. You seem to have quite an advanced sort of team and job title. Oxfordshire has a terrific pedigree for automotive manufacturing, doesn't it? And technical excellence and Formula One and things like that. Do you have an exceptional technological community there? Does that make any difference to where you sit in this picture, or is that just coincidence?
No, I think that starts with having an Oxford University to start with, because, we've got not just some really first class technology companies working in the Oxfordshire region, but also we've got Oxford University, we've got Brookes University, two leading universities working in various fields, but very much in the field of efficient energy use and how do we move forward in this really complicated journey. And we do a lot of work working with people like the Energy Unit at University of Oxford, the Transport Studies Unit, Brookes University have done some amazing stuff. And then it's very important in the work that we do work with commercial and academic partners, because we have certain expertise within the team at Oxfordshire County Council, but the real experts are those that are trying to deliver it, and those people that are monitoring and then trying to look at where do we go next after what we're doing today.
Excellent, thanks. And so, Lorna, if I come to you then, so when it comes to fleet management, how important is innovation for you, and what is hot right now?
Oh, it's absolutely critical, and that's a beautiful segue from Paul into how on earth do you make it happen. So, yes, good afternoon, everybody. Lorna McAteer, Head of Fleet at National Grid. So my remit is looking after all of our vehicles, and I've been in and around the industry for a while now, from those early days and points where you're trying to encourage people, just give it a try, just one little vehicle and one little charge point, and trying to make that work on an individual basis. Where I am now is all about mass adoption and making this normal. This is just business as usual. When you come in to replace your vehicle, it's now the next vehicle is as close to a zero emission vehicle as you can get out the tailpipe. So what are the choices? How do you make it happen? And how do you make it happen en masse? So basically, we've got most vehicle types, everything from all the cars all the way through to the HGVs. I'm not quite tackling my helicopters, even though they're in that remit as well. And it's how do we do it? So innovation for me is absolutely crucial, because I'm always trying to work out what's next, what's coming down the line, how do I get over this problem, where do I go from it? And of course, I guess we can't ignore the fact that I actually work for National Grid, so I have that hat on every now and again. And yes, the grid can cope.
Excellent. Nice point made. And obviously, by this time next year, we expect you to have an airship or something. So clearly, that's how your remit's expanding. So then, Amit, you've been working on e-mobility for a number of years now. I'd like you perhaps to open with some thoughts on what changes you've seen and the top trends in innovation you recognise at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And hello, everyone. So from an e-mobility perspective in Schneider, we've been in the industry for around 10 years now, so a decade. So very early on in the market, understanding simple protocols, simple systems, from smart charging to power distribution behind it. And we really sit behind a lot of organizations and public bodies around seeing what happens behind the scenes. So what are the challenges to make electrification of transportation real? What's the hardware equipment required to provide that kind of solution and resolution behind it? But then leading into innovation and technologies that go after that as well. So as a group, Schneider invests 5% of our annual turnover back into R&D each year, and EV sits within that element of innovation in Schneider Electric. So I think why that's happened is really because we've seen in other markets and industries around the world where they adopt EV, like Norway, who are far more advanced in terms of grid saturation for EV compared to the UK, we're able to learn, adopt and deploy technologies from that. So what we've seen historically to today is really, as the power demand increases, as Lorna said, the grid has enough power. It's not so much about how much power is available, it's how we use it and how we distribute it. And linking into Paul's point, the DNOs and those who are local to that power distribution, how we start making that system smarter and sharing that power out between saturating energy in one place and making it distributed and more localized in an energy system. So that's really where we've seen the power and the question around EV going, I need to plug my cable into a charger, to actually this is a grid question, but it's a question of making it flexible and smart.
Excellent, nice points. And I think there's some comments made, especially with reference to distributed and decentralized energy. And I think apart from transport, Darren yesterday was saying it is also an evolving scenario between now and say 2030 even. So the point was made that, business talks about being agile, but all players in this market will require a degree of agility, not just in terms of changing regulation. Present, obviously, we're seeing pretty intense turmoil in the economic side of things. So it's an evolving and changing picture. And obviously, countrywide. There are an awful lot of moving parts. So great. Thank you for those intros. So this middle section, this is the most fun bit for me, because this is where, if I can rustle up some provocations, this is called challenges and conflicts. So the reason we have these debates is if it was all going absolutely smoothly, we wouldn't need to talk about it. But we know there are some wrinkles, there are some bumps in the road, there is some friction, there are some challenges. Some things don't work quite as we'd like them to, as quickly as we want. So that's what I want to get into in this middle bit. It's the obstacles, the shortfalls, the barriers. What's the problem? Is it policy, tech, skills, or is it just cost? What needs to happen to get that infrastructure in place faster and further? So I'm going to start with you, Paul. We've touched on it a bit already. So if every home had a drive, every workplace had a secure car park, every retail outlet had dedicated charging bays, we all know life would be a lot simpler, but it's not like that. So as a council, how do you balance rolling out standard installations just as far and as fast as you can to get mass market access with tackling the awkward, the problematic, the one-off, the innovation cases? So how do you balance those priorities?
Sometimes you can actually do the two together. So you're solving two problems at once. So like most local authorities, one of the big issues for us is, and it's been touched on before, how do we meet the needs of those people who don't have driveways? Now, when we first started doing the work at Oxfordshire, a chance remark by a colleague of mine who, sat there having a coffee with him, and we were talking about a particular road not far from where I'm sat, where they don't have off-road parking. But my colleague Sam, just in a throwaway comment, went, "It's so stupid, isn't there? They've got a car park opposite." And we looked at each other and went, "Hang on." And we did a load of mapping work. And guess what? The biggest areas in the market towns of Oxfordshire where they don't have off-road parking, there tends to be a district council car park right slap bang in the middle of them. Because when you think about it logically, they're all the older centres of the towns. So we put together a project called Park and Charge. We're just finishing off our 20th car park, 250 chargers, all located within 5-minute walk of areas where they have huge need because they don't have off-road parking. And the whole idea behind Park and Charge is overnight, go and use those chargers. No cost for parking. Yes, you do have to pay your charge for your electricity. But during the day, they're also there as just general chargers for anybody to use. And, we're encouraging good use by having cheaper rates at night so that we're using, electricity when it's not in demand so much. And that is beginning to prove to be a very good model. And we're now beginning to, in the strategy we put together in Oxfordshire, a strategy we put together with our district council colleagues, we're now referring to that as the backbone, off of which everything else grows. Because if we can guarantee that there's a charging hub in all the centres that people can get access to, if the worst comes to the worst, they've got that to fall back on. But then it's about how you then roll that out. And you talk about conflicts. One of the big conflicts we've had is, people talk about putting in on-street chargers. The topology of Oxfordshire is tight. Lots of it's medieval, so there isn't a lot of room to put in on-street chargers. And guess what? The residents who want the charging don't want the off-street chargers either, because it spoils their view. So we've also gone to the other extreme, some really low-tech solutions. So one of the big ones we are working on in Oxfordshire is called the Gully. And it's as simple as putting a channel in the pavement so you can install a home charger outside your house, run the cable through the gully safely, and bring your cable out curbside so you can charge curbside. Huge advantages with that. We as a council don't have to worry about the charging infrastructure. You as a resident, you get access to domestic cost energy, which, as we all know, is cheaper than public charging at the best of the day. It means there is the possibility in future to use things like V2X. What's the challenge with that then? Well, the technology is simple, but it's the licensing, the planning authorities, it's all that sort of thing. That's where we've been spending all our time, and we've been working on this for the last year. We're nearly there now, not quite ready to roll it out fully yet, but we're nearly there. But that's where the challenges come from, is making systems that were made for old ways of doing things work for new ways of doing things. And even sometimes the systems that we're put in place for the new ways of working still have issues with them. The example there is, if you install a home charger and you have a driveway, you have permitted development. You don't need to go for planning permission to have that charger installed. If you don't have a driveway, you don't get permitted development. You have to have planning permission to install it on your house. Now, it's done for the right reasons, to stop people putting cables across pavements, but we're facing that issue at the moment. I have to say, we're working with OZEV to try and solve this one. But, you know, there's always these unintended consequences that come with the things that we do. So, you know, that's a very brief thing of sort of showing we're going from one extreme of technology to another extreme of technology, and there's lots in the middle as well. But,
excellent. It's a really nice run through, because you pointed out, obviously there are some relatively low cost or low tech or simple, easy solutions. Some of the things you might think are hard can turn out to be easy. Some of the things that might appear easy on paper turn out to be hard in practice once you consider other things like planning, etc. So, and I think also we heard yesterday, there is an opportunity in the market as well. Solution providers are talking to private landowners, for example, about options for hubs, revenue streams for them potentially. So there is also a strong development and a commercial opportunity in the private space, which will obviously prompt some new installations and hubs as well. So then coming to you, Lorna, so my challenges kind of, so you worked previously over in Germany, as well as on the largest commercial EV project in the UK for another employer. So I'm going to say, surely there's some simple lessons to be learned from elsewhere. You can be applied by fleet owners up and down the country. So do we really need more innovation? Can we not just scale up what we have and crack on?
It's a great challenge, and actually I think there is always a need for innovation no matter where you are. But going back to your point on simplicity, absolutely, the lessons learned everywhere else is keep it simple. So as a fleet operator, fleet manager, anyone having to look at the sustainability and decarbonisation of transport is keep it simple. So a lot of my key tips there are: have a plan, have a target, control what you can control, and know what you can't, because there is no point changing something yet. As I alluded to earlier, I haven't quite got my solutions for helicopters, so don't worry about it yet. Don't do it all now. It's not a cliff edge. This is a transition, and you're going to work your way through it. There's no point throwing away good vehicles just to replace with something else yet, especially if you haven't got all the tech behind it. But the lesson I think we're still missing, no matter where I work, what I do, where I go, we bandy around the word collaboration, but we don't actually mean it. We're still out there trying to compete and trying to do things. And the example specifically that I'm talking about is we've got lots of innovation on new vehicles. They're all coming out with all this new EV tech, and they're not backward compatible to the charge points. So you'll turn up there and immediately they don't work. So what we're not seeing is collaboration, genuine collaboration between OEMs talking to CPOs to make sure all the language and the standards are set. I think we're still in this bit of I need to get ahead of the competition, and we're not actually having those conversations. So let's keep it simple and genuinely, please collaborate, because we can only do this when we work together.
Excellent. So have a plan, keep it simple, and collaborate. And a nice point there, we've seen in some other, say, sustainable technology sectors where it's very exciting when there are all the proprietary systems and products coming up. And it's great that private and commercial organizations are involved and they're looking to win market share, but then everybody starts crying out for standards and regulation and a level playing field and some kind of consistency, because once it gets to that almost scale, it's the gaps and the differences. That's where the problems start emerging. So it's a growing up phase, if you like, perhaps. Yeah. It's exciting that we're growing up, but we're going to need a little bit more sophistication if we're going to reach where we want to go. So coming to you now, Amit, it's a bit a question in a similar vein, and you touched on a little bit of it already, but rapidly emerging market, loads of brand new customers, as we said. You know, I think there's a third study out today, a third more people are looking at electric vehicles than were previously, etc. So numbers are flying up. Solutions providers can target these as well as existing customers. So why is it in the interest of a global business like yours to chase innovation and technological advances when, to be honest, there must be literally millions of easy first-timer sales that you could just grab for market share and profit? So why do the hard stuff when you can just be picking up all the easy wins?
Maybe we do a bit of both, Jim, who knows? But ultimately, I think interesting what's been said so far around standards and protocols, because Schneider as an organization, we really focus on technical standards, and not just electrical, but systems and IT protocols as well. So things like CPOs, OCPP, communications, making sure that it works, it's compatible, not just for the vehicle. We're entering this domain now very quickly where the charge point acts as a gateway. So you've got the vehicle talking to the charger, but then the charger now needs to talk to a system. So that maturity needs to happen between the vehicle OEMs, the charge point manufacturers, but then also this whole complex system behind it. And unfortunately, it is complex because you can charge at home, you can charge in public, you can charge at work, you can charge in 4 or 5 different locations, really. So to create a standard system around it is complex, and every customer wants something a bit different. Everybody sees something that looks nice, that looks good, but ultimately what they don't appreciate straight away is the challenges around closed systems and proprietary systems, because ultimately it's a case of ripping things out, replacing it for maybe something that looks like a less functional system, but provides the organization with longevity and also reliability. So back to your question, why we focus on that innovation and standards piece is because as an organization, we believe that's really important. We believe that actually having open technology, having systems which are interoperable, not just at a charge point level, but as a systems of systems play, we have to be a market leader in what we believe the market needs going forward. And it can't be a short-term win because, you know, in a global picture, Schneider's valued at around, 29 billion euros. So we have huge heritage and legacy we need to protect in this space. And that's by doing things ethically, correctly, and things like Modbus systems. You know, we are completely open in our systems of systems play. So we really want the market to mature probably a bit quicker than it is, because it is a challenge for us sometimes when we talk to people about what's possible and what's not possible. But that will also help technology and innovation come along a bit further, because if everyone follows the same principles and the same technologies, we're able to pull in the same direction. We're able to tell customers who have large fleets, this is what's possible, this is what you can do, and this is what's going to give you longevity. And I just think there's that competitiveness in the industry still, which is valuable because it helps create differentiation, but it doesn't really help give a succinct message to business owners, and it actually probably creates a bit of delay and apprehension in deploying, because they hear probably 1 of 5 of 6 messages what's possible today rather than what's right for them.
Nice point. And I think some of it in a sense comes down to if you have organizations that are at the forefront of technological advances or innovation, it does help underpin their brand in terms of having a voice at the table as regards standards and influence in terms of market direction. So it's subtle connections, if you like, but it's felt you're invested in the future and the progress, and therefore you potentially have more say in what that's going to look like. So there's also that brand positioning piece, I think. So lastly, Lowry, if I come to you, so you and your team help, it says, government bodies, local level institutions, private clients better understand the future demands of decarbonised transport pathways, their infrastructure requirements and their suitability for a net zero future in the UK. You're an engineer, a problem solver. So what exactly is their problem? Why are they not moving faster and further down the road? What's the issue? And is innovation the answer?
Yeah, so we get the opportunity to work with a huge variety of organisations and bodies, whether they be national or more local level, and we get the opportunity to work with super advanced local authorities like Oxford, but we also we get the view of quite how diverse the skill set, the knowledge base, the resources are of these different bodies, and what they are always wanting, especially those who may not even have that much time or resource to put into transport decarbonisation planning, is this need for evidence. And I use evidence in quotation marks, which I'll explain in a bit, but over the last couple of years, it's clear that there's always this requirement for evidence to underpin decision making. Obviously, sensible. The need for frameworks also sensible, but that poses a significant challenge when we are, in real terms, really only still at the very, very, very early start of mass adoption. We're just creeping into that mass market adoption, maybe, and we're also in a country where there's a huge variety of where people live, how they use their vehicles, what ability they have over their own space. So there is no one size fits all as to what charging infrastructure solution or tariff option or vehicle will work best for them, which makes, like Paul was talking, decision making can be quite challenging, and drawing whole scale policy decision lines in the sand like an absolute minefield. So the only way to solve this is to have innovation, because innovation breeds diversity of choice and of options. And this innovation needs to be in not only charging solutions, but in vehicles, in finance, in policy, in the energy system. I could carry on with the list. And from my perspective, it has been and will continue to be vitally important in order to build this evidence base. The innovations need to get into the hands of real world mass market consumers as early as possible in the development of them. And you need to engage consumers and people who ultimately want to be interacting with these technologies in their development. Not only do trials and like pilot programs offer users to develop a chance of how an EV might fit into their life, it also offers a really valuable opportunity for innovators and SMEs and local authorities, whoever it may be, to develop their understanding of their technologies, to test them in a technical sense, but also around their business models and their operating models. As is apparent from the current situation in the energy markets, selling electricity, which is the underlying function of charging infrastructure, does not always make for like a smooth sailing business case. And creating a commercial proposition for charge point operators is only able to be evidenced really in order to generate investment, whatever that may be, through having evidence of it working with real people in the real world. So creating those real world chances for users and innovators to gather the evidence for whether it may be a local or government body or private investment, I think really means that we'll be able to foster a innovative, diverse option of charging solutions that will work for the different people in different areas of this country.
Excellent. So, yeah, good answer there. That it's the fact there is a no one size fits all solution, which we hear a lot. That is exactly why you need innovation. It breeds that diversity of choice and options. So nice point made, and it brings me happily on to, we've looked at some of the challenges and the difficulties and the tricky stuff. The last round of questions from me, and audience already see a question going in there from James. If you some more, pop them in the ask a questions button at the bottom. So this is my reasons to be cheerful round, which is a enjoy reference, I think, but it's imagine rose-tinted spectacles on. It's all gone brilliantly well over this next decade. It's successful, it's sustainable. We've rolled out EV charging, we're decarbonising road transport, saving money on fuel, green jobs galore, net zero targets, or a walk in the park. It's all going terrifically well. Of course, that could happen. That could happen. So, but first, Amit then. So innovation is exciting. Paint us a picture of a dynamic, fully charged e-mobility market of the future. Sell us that vision of this exciting tomorrow.
I could be out of a job if that happens. So I've got so I think, ultimately there's a lot of transition that needs to occur in this space. So when we think about EV driving of the future compared to today, realistically, we need to envisage it something being that's connected through the system back to the grid. So an EV driver is connected to their building, they're connected to their home via a charger. That gateway is then connected to a distributed energy resource system, which has a decentralized energy piece, where we have things like localized battery storage, we have things like on-site renewable, and we're actually converting and changing people's behaviors from going into more of a prosumer model. So, this is where we're able to engage and interact with the grid, commercialize electricity as individuals, and start thinking about the realization of vehicle to grid or vehicle to X, however that occurs. So I think the short term to medium term future for that energy piece for EV charging is really going to be for bi-directional charge at home, because you can get the one-to-one participation buy-in. It's a lot more easier to manage. You don't have to worry about having big scale participation and multiple vendors engaging in it. I think once you start taking things like vehicle grid on the road, you get into very complex energy plays, which we will overcome, but there's a lot of things we need to tackle before that. And then also, I think we also need to start looking at, we'll have this protection and this security behind it, but also the power distribution that supports a lot of this infrastructure needs to start accelerating to become more bespoke for electric vehicle charging. We talk about standards, safety systems, protecting the driver from electrical distribution systems. I think there needs to be a bit of a flourish in the industry around the distribution equipment that goes with it as well. So ideally 2030, I won't talk about autonomous vehicles because that could go off on a complete tangent, but very much in a space where businesses, individual users and homeowners are acting as prosumers, trading with energy, using electric vehicles as resilience and storage systems, and being able to actually be prosperous in an energy system which they don't have access to today.
Excellent. That's I buy into that vision. You'd win my vote, and it is party conference time, so that's appropriate enough. So prosumers, bi-directional opportunities, and really you're saying that in a sense, it's the EV and e-mobility piece is only truly exciting as part of the bigger transition story. That's where it really catches fire. Catches fire is the wrong phrase to use. So Lowry, picking winners is a dangerous game, and I know you said you're technology neutral, but if you had to flag an area of innovation, shall we say, as the one to watch, what would you highlight and why? So give us something we should all be watching, we lay people.
Yes, and probably what kindly I'd refer to as open-minded and cruelly people would refer to as a fence sitter. But I'm really interested in a fair and equitable transition in transport, and that means bringing everyone along, not just the people that can park their Jaguar I-Pace on their drive. So for me, that means the focus should be probably on street or these local rapid hub solutions. And on street, like Paul mentioned, there are huge challenges with people wanting charging but not wanting a massive charge point dumped on their street, for a variety of perfectly valid reasons and some not valid ones also. So for me, charging solutions that can be installed with as little disruption as possible. The gully I had never heard of before, and that sounds like really interesting. But things like lamppost installations or the installations that can sink into the ground, I think you need to minimize disruption for if you're going to do a wide scale on street rollout, because people really aren't necessarily in the place that they want to support the big posts going in. I would also say, though, that if there is any public charging innovation that can meaningfully offer pricing on par or as close to on par with the pricing that domestic EV chargers can see, that would be extremely welcomed in my book. I'm not sure that I've seen anything that, as it stands, can really compare. I'm happy to be proved wrong, but I think that that's really vital, a really vital area for development to ensure that we can encourage that 100% transition. Otherwise, you're never going to be able to convince people that if they can't charge at home, that they should be having a car that needs charging anyway.
Absolutely. Nice point. So actually, that was one of the things I was potentially going to ask you, and you have touched on that in a way. Normally, as cost comes down over time, as the technology advances and the market numbers go up. However, obviously, energy prices are volatile and high. Supply chain issues, post-COVID, and also the conflict in Ukraine are affecting. And so we have a distorted and difficult market in a lot of ways. And those price, the scale economies are not necessarily happening in the way people might have predicted. Are you seeing that is holding back innovation, or shall we say commercialization of innovation? Are you seeing a pinch in terms of the numbers?
I think in terms of commercialization, yes, I wouldn't necessarily say that is only as a result of the current energy situation, though. In terms of finding a business model that is quite profitable, is really challenging in the charging space as it stands, because the scale does not exist yet. The demand is not there. It's starting to be there, but people are also having bad experiences with public charging and the robustness of public charging and the ability to pay or have 7 different apps, and all of these aspects really play into people's desire or want to even bother to interface with public charging. So yes, there's certainly challenges around commercialization opportunities. I know this is meant to be the rosy section, but this
it is. Yeah, sorry, yeah, I shouldn't have asked a tricky question. Yeah,
there is starting to be funding focused in hopefully the right places. The one of the funds that was announced in March from the government, the Rapid Charging Fund, is specifically to install rapid chargers in areas where the commercialization case doesn't stack up. So that is there to help subsidize those charging infrastructures. And I think we need more of that, more focused, specific funding or support streams for areas where otherwise a business wouldn't decide to.
Absolutely. And Lorna, if I come to you now, maybe, so numbers involved in fleet fuel consumption emissions are massive. So you have a large portfolio, big brief, big checkbook in a sense, inadvertently. So how can innovation in commercial vehicles really drive decarbonisation, pun intended, at scale?
So it's interesting. I think everything you guys have just mentioned is absolutely there. And I think you also just brush the surface of the daily woes of every single fleet manager out there at the moment in balancing everything off and the challenges. And innovation is absolutely key, because if you look at the commercial vehicles only, you have very different challenges. You've got size, scale, payloads, niche, power takeoff equipment and everything that goes with it. So whether it's a catenary, pantograph type solution, whether you're looking at hydrogens in the future, whether you're even looking at wireless charging solutions with battery storage for your vehicles that are on standby as emergency, innovation is absolutely key. But I'd also like to say there are some very simple things we can do that don't need innovation to help scale commercials rapidly. Two very quick examples I can give you, just because of first-hand experience. I drove a high-roof electric transit from John O'Groats to Land's End. I made it, only 13 charges. However, there were several car parks that I couldn't get into because of height restrictions. And the chargers are being put where the cars can currently go. They're not being put where anybody else can use them. So you have that challenge. And the other simple thing is the vehicles are just too big. Even cars nowadays are puffed up. You know, we've got so many safety features on them that very simply, you just need to change the planning guidelines for a car park. Very simply change that X by Y dimension to be bigger, because now you've got charge points on the side of vehicles with big cables sticking out. You just cannot fit things there. And even if you put a charge point at the end of it, you're going to have trailing cables and you need to put bump stops and other bits and pieces. Parking spaces are not big enough. So whilst there's absolutely need all this innovation, this new battery tech, the new minerals, you know, how do we save the resources we're using as well and everything else, we can actually do some very simple, basic things to help things en masse.
Nice point. And Paul, then if I come to you, just before Q&A, and we've got the questions queuing up, and we've got a couple in LinkedIn as well. So a little future gazing for you, Paul. So fast forward just 5 or 10 years, and we know how quickly that's going to go. What might success look like for EV charging?
At its most simple, it's that a lot of these innovations that Amit and others have been talking about are readily available, easy to use, when the resident or the business or the fleet user or the visitor to Oxfordshire wants to use them, and at a cost that they can use. You said that this is the good news section. It is happening. It is increasingly happening. And New Automotive, who track EV registrations, were reporting that Oxfordshire last month, August, sorry, not last month, is it? Because we're nearly in October, but in August, 32% of all new car registrations were EV. That's on a rolling 3-month basis. So things are happening out there. We're seeing it. You've only got to travel around. And what we now need to make sure is that we've got all the right technologies, all those innovations in place as they become available so people can use them. But you come back to that human factor. Keep it simple.
Good stuff. Very positive note to finish on. This takes us into the live Q&A. So keep those questions coming. As I said, you pose them, I'll ask them. Amit, Lowry, Lorna and Paul will answer them. Pop them in the ask a question box at the bottom. The first one actually I'm going to take is for you, Paul. And it's a challenge, and it says, nice idea. How many spaces are actually available if you convert 100% of the cars on the road requiring charging? Look at the number of cars parked on the street. James says, will Oxford have enough car parking spaces in those 20 sites? And I wonder if you could also add a little comment about the fact, of course, councils face the challenge that we don't want to encourage excessive car usage. It's not only about private vehicles. There's also, electric bus fleets and pedestrianised areas, etc. So it's not about filling every available space in car park with a vehicle. So, but taking James's question then, so how many spaces, how on earth are you going to service those numbers? There are more vehicles than parking spots.
Yeah, right. not everybody needs to charge up every night. If you look at it on average, actually, people actually only need to charge up 2 or 3 times a week. So the idea that you need a space for everybody every day actually isn't true. That said, yes, there is a challenge making sure there is enough charging infrastructure for the numbers that we expect. But that comes back to that there are going to have to be more than one type of solution. So the hubs will work in some locations. If we talk about Oxford City itself, that's more of a challenge using the hub model there because they've got a smaller number of car parks. So that's where things like the Gully, other solutions that we've been working on with people like Trojan Energy, also looking at there is going to be the need for the traditional on-street charger as well. But what we've got to do is use the right solution in the right place and make sure that the demand is met. But the other side of that is that we've also got to reduce the amount of private car journeys that are going on, as you mentioned. And we have a policy, the local transport and connectivity policy, which is all about trying to encourage people to use different types of transportation, whether that be active travel, buses, trains, whatever. And certainly there are targets to reduce the number of car journeys that are going on. And anybody that's ever travelled through Oxford will know exactly what I mean. It is one of those places that jams up at the drop of a hat.
Absolutely. And so now we also have a question here on basically we're talking about the tech, the vehicles, the things, even the system as a thing. But of course, there's a skills question. And so there's a question about should innovation play a part in recruiting, training the workforce needed to scale up this installation? So Lower, if I could come to you first, if the Catapult's going to unleash this innovation, of course, you need the people to be able to do that. How much of a challenge is the upskilling or the skill set or purely the available bodies to do some of this?
Yeah, so I would say that upskilling has been sort of it's been swirling around the kind of like discussion that the Energy Systems Catapult has been having over the last few years, and it's starting to become more of a focus going forward. In terms of specifically regarding EV infrastructure installations, I'm not sure I have too much to add on that front, but I think it goes beyond just having the people to be able to install it. It goes also to having the skills within decision-making bodies and being able to translate that the technical world of the innovators themselves and what the requirements are for installation to what that means in the real world and what that means for planning and for people to be able to make decisions. So that is something that Energy Systems Catapult does try to do. I would say that we haven't necessarily dived into how many people we're going to need to dig up the roads to put all the chargers in.
I can see you nodding there plenty, Amit. I'm going to throw the same question to you. Obviously, you're a global player, but then when it comes down to country level and specifically in e-mobility, etc., could you give us an idea where do you feel we're at in terms of the skills, the people, the recruitment, and especially young people in some sectors? It's an aging workforce, or the skills are, in the older generation. So have we got the workforce we need to do this kind of work over the next 5-10 years?
I'm not going to answer that question directly just yet, but probably just put some context around it first. So, the EV industry is a combination of electrical and digital systems, right? So we're combining two very different skill sets where there's an assumption that someone who's going to do the electrical work will also do the digital work as well. But if you go back a step again and just think about an asset and how it's managed for its life cycle, if you start thinking about how it's installed, if there's a failure or fault, how we repair it, how we manage it for a 10-year period, and we think about innovative business models, thinking about how does a business become incentivized to deploy charging infrastructure and assets over a 10-year life cycle, or even 15 some cases? It's a different value proposition because we don't know what the technology is going to be like in 15 years versus the investment that's going into those businesses today. So the short answer to your question of is the skill set there, it's an aging skill set which is moving further away from us. And there has been a gap in investment in that sector for skill sets for the last decade, where we have to face the fact that there will be a shortage coming up very shortly. And we're seeing it now across the electrical industry generally. We talk about having, on-street parking. We want to have innovation hubs with solar canopies. We want to have but we have to have people there to actually go and fit this equipment who are competent and have the skill set. And that is going to be it's a massive opportunity for people. It's a massive opportunity for a sector that's exciting, booming. It's re-energized the electrical distribution industry. So we do need to focus on the skill set. We need to focus on the people doing it. And that's important, because otherwise we're going to have a load of ideas with no one putting it in the ground, or a lot of infrastructure that doesn't work properly, not because the technology is not right, but because it's not been installed and fitted and maintained properly. So all of these things need to come together in a context that makes it real and deliverable.
Excellent. And of course, I mean, obviously you are competing with other organizations for talent. Obviously, it's that kind of marketplace. But to what degree are you collaborating in terms of as an industry, say, as in the electrical sector, trying to bring forward and support the kind of training regimes that underpin, people coming out of college or school or whatever? So in other words, how much are you collaborating in order that you don't lose a generation? Is that happening across the sector?
Yeah, so there's bodies and institutions in the electrical industry that really are focusing on this now to bring in. I don't think it's almost a generation loss. It's capturing the imagination of people to come into the industry. So you don't have to be a school leaver. You could be someone in your mid-career that thinks that this is a good opportunity for you. So so Schneider Electric, for example, we work with 2 or 3 industry bodies around training and development of talent and bringing people in to give them opportunities across sector. But going back to what the skills are required today to what's in the future, I know from our perspective, we're bringing in more apprentices in the business who will go across the business to work not just on the electrical side, but on the data side, the information gathering side, and also marketing cross-function to give them the skill sets, because you have to have a wide spectrum of skill sets now in this industry to be able to deliver it. So yes, there's more engagement on the industry and bodies. There's more that needs to be done. And we know, all the other organizations as well out there, they're all really investing in this whole idea of introducing more apprentices and giving more people opportunities in this space.
Excellent. And we know from conversations we have with other energy and construction businesses and sectors that, of course, with digitalization, you're not necessarily competing against just other energy or construction firms. You're competing against software developers. You're competing against entirely different market for the same talent. So if we take the other question from James, Lorna, and you may also have a comment on the skills thing, but the batteries question. And James has asked about battery technology could impact change of cars to 1,000 miles rather than 200. We'll need a lot less charging, etc. I wonder if you could give us what your view is on how much of a factor in this equation is battery technology advancement going to be?
Yep. So completely personal opinion on this one. Why do you want to do that? So no, the reason I say that is we don't even do it on diesels at the moment. We don't have 1,000-mile tank. We could. We've chosen not to. And there are all sorts of reasons behind that. So you're always going to have a sweet spot between the optimum fuel in the vehicle and distance for everything else you need to do with it. So we already know, even if you take a diesel truck, it needs to be on a high, fast-powered diesel pump in order to get enough fuel into it to fill it up quickly enough. So you've got the same with the electric vehicles as well. So yes, but you have to remember, the bigger the battery, the longer it takes to charge. Human behaviours, you're going to run it to empty, so it's going to take you several days to charge it unless you put in bigger, faster, more rapid chargers. So whilst the battery tech might involve that we can do it faster, you've still got the same amount of electricity to put through, which means bigger, thicker cables. So you're just shifting one problem to another one. And let's face it, human nature, you stop more often than you realise anyway. So actually there's an adage out there at the moment, which is you stop when charged, you don't stop to charge. Yeah, so you charge when stopped, don't stop to charge. Okay, do it the right way around. So it's a behavioural thing as much as anything else. So while I understand that question innovation may allow us to get there, why would you want to?
Yeah, so it's possible, but not. And also, there's a nice point made by Darren from Department for Transport yesterday about, of course, part of this mass market picture is going to be the second-hand market, which hasn't really been a player yet, but will be over the next period of time and will improve affordability, but also potentially that those will be cars, the performance of which is poorer because they were produced earlier, potentially. So they will also perhaps need more charging and not have the latest and the newest. So we will also get a bit of diversity in terms of capability and performance within the market as those numbers grow. So this we're just now bang on time, I think. And so all that remains for me to do is to say some nice thank yous to everybody involved. So here we are at the very, very close of our session. So it's a big thank you to all our panelists, Lowry, Lorna, Paul, and of course Amit, and our sponsors at Schneider Electric. Yourselves out there in Crowdcast for your questions and comments. A reminder to check out elementaldigital.co.uk, online community for professionals focused on innovation in heat, water, air and energy, the vital elements within the built environment now and in the future. Full diary of events on the website, including the one tomorrow with Portsmouth City Council. Tune in at 1 p.m. to hear their story as well. So thanks again to the panel. Great work today. That's it from me. See you all again tomorrow. I've been Jim McClelland. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.